Hello everybody, today we are looking at how to throw grenades. This video will be covering a few concepts about how to throw grenades. These are going to be more advanced, complex topics and concepts. A lot of the time people probably already know how to obviously throw a grenade. It's pretty simple and straightforward, but I'm going to be talking about more of the advanced, minute things that you may not realize, and basically just trying to purposefully throw the grenade in the most effective way, the most consistent way, and statistically making it so it is going to give you the best results, so you can minimize and mitigate any mistakes and wasted grenades. You don't want to throw a grenade and have it be wasted. So I'll be talking about different ways you can be throwing the grenade, aka letting go of the grenade, and then also talking about where you are throwing it, aka the angle of throwing, talking about like air bursting, sliding a grenade, bouncing a grenade off walls or doors, and then I'll also be talking about the kind of the complexities of the trajectory and other textures that you might come across, like say for example a rug or glass on the ground can change the trajectory and how the grenade is going to move depending on the texture of the ground, as I said. So we're just going to be looking at all of those types of things, and this is going to be the best way to optimize how you're throwing these grenades. Now there are 4 different types of grenades, so it does make sense to throw these all differently, as obviously different ones can bounce a different way. So like stingers, they have a rounded bottom. Sometimes when you throw them close, they kind of have these issues. You probably, if you've seen my other videos, I've talked about kind of the differences when throwing flashbangs and at least stingers when it comes to that kind of stuff. A lot of the time, the other ones in terms of flashbang, 9bangs, and the CS gas are thrown very similarly because they are very similarly shaped most of the time. So the variation in throwing isn't going to be a big difference. The only thing that's going to be slightly different in how you throw it is a stinger. But what do I mean by how should you throw grenades? Now, there are a couple ways of throwing grenades. You can press the quick throw grenade button, which on keyboard is G. Then there is the option of swapping to the grenade, holding the throw button, and then you can hold it and kind of prime it, and whenever you need to throw it, you are able to. Now, there is a hand to kind of help you direct where you're throwing it. A lot of the time, you have to figure out how it's going to leave the hand to be able to actually figure out how to throw it. A lot of the time, I don't really worry about this. I kind of instinctively know how to throw it, because as you can see, there's no like obvious kind of throw arc. When you're doing this, the only way I'm able to throw it through specific things is because I kind of know off by heart that a certain angle or throw, arc is going to happen. But past that, past the quick throw, past throwing it like that, a good way to throw it, and this is kind of an alternative way to throw it, is that if you want to throw it in, let's say, for example, through a crack of a door, obviously this is opened, and if you do it like this, how can you throw it through this one? Now, you could throw it like this and prime it. It's a little tricky. I did get it into the door, but an easier way to do it is if you aim, press quick throw while holding the aim button still. You'll notice that it throws it very, very well, very straight, so you can actually direct it where it's going. But that's also not what I'm talking about. And to be very clear, you should be throwing grenades like as I just threw it. You aim, you hold the aim button, you click G to throw it, and you can throw it very accurately. And you just got to get used to the arc of it, and of course the distance and all that other stuff. Now, what I am talking about when I talk about how to throw a grenade, I am talking about more or less where to throw it. Now, let's say this is the room that is the room we're going to be working on. Now, obviously, we're going to be throwing it from this door frame. So let's just think that logically, if I were to throw the grenade anywhere behind this line, just over here, anywhere behind this area, it's not really going to affect this part of the room. So obviously the best type of grenade throw in this specific room is going to be somewhere like here in the center. Usually, most of the time, it's going to be in the center of the room. That way you can blind everyone equally and actually clear it. So the question is, how do you throw it right here? As I said before, when it comes to throwing grenades, you can take out your grenade and throw it. Obviously, you can do a quick grenade throw. And of course, you can do the aim and do that like that. Now, what I like to do is you crouch down, you hold toggle lean, you hold free lean, you lean over, you crouch even more by holding W. And then what you do is you aim, You press G. It is a lot of button presses, but you got to get used to this. And depending on how you understand the geometry of how it works, I talk about this in my other video about how it kind of like slides across the ground, rolls across the ground, depending on which one it is. Stingers are going to be slightly easier for this situation. But if I want to get it like perfectly kind of right there, as I said, I'm going to do all those things. I'm going to try to do a quick grenade throw like this. And as you can see, I got virtually exactly where I want. Oh, I was looking at the wrong thing. Virtually as close as I thought. I thought this was the marker. My bad. But anyway, I basically got exactly where I intended to put it. So this would be a very good flash. If someone was behind the door here, if someone was over here, they would have been flashed, right? Let's pretend this was a wall, of course, or whatever. If there was a wall, there'd be a good chance they'd be getting hit by this. And of course, same thing here. Now, a lot of the time, whenever you see somebody entering a room, they will do this. They will quick throw far into the room, and it'll explode very far into a corner, which does not really help anybody. Most of the time, you are throwing them closer to the areas that you're going to be clearing. If you were to go enter this room, and assuming that you have already cleared this kind of section, you'd want to throw it directly in the center of the room. So it kind of becomes a fun game of see if you can roll it close enough to the spot on the floor. Now, as I said, the best way to do this is, once again, I'm going to illustrate this. You're going to press crouch. You are going to do a toggle lean, just like this with E. Then you're going to hold Alt. You're going to hold S. This is obviously for keyboard. And for a slightly better angle, you're going to hold D, which leans you over to the far end. You don't necessarily need to hold it. It will give you a little bit more lower to the ground here, as you can kind of see. When you do let go, for some reason, it bounces you up just a tiny bit. If you want to, it doesn't really matter, but you can let go of D. You aim, right click, and then you're going to do the quick throw. Now, this is something you do have to get used to. I will illustrate this really quickly with the flashbang. This specifically, the way flashbangs work, obviously if you throw them in the air, if I were to throw it in the air, it would fly and then it would bounce however it would bounce, right? But if you do that kind of leaning technique, as I said, you can actually see how the grenade rolls on the ground. So it'll actually, for the first bit of the roll, it'll go straight and then it'll curve off because it'll start rolling because of how the flashbang is physically shaped. Now, obviously you can throw it, as I said, like any way, like this. So if I am using something like a stinger, obviously the issue when you are using multiple types of grenades, and this is kind of an issue where I haven't really discussed this per se, but if you have more than one type of grenade, when you do a quick throw, if you notice how I'm aiming and I crouch and I do the technique and I press G, it's always going to be a flashbang because that's the order in which I had selected it in my loadout. And I have discussed this before. So if you do actually have, let's say, for example, I can illustrate this better with a tactical. So if you have like a taser, if you put like, say, 1 point in C2 and then 1 point in taser, and then whenever you pull out what you would want to be your taser immediately, you actually pull out your C2 first, and then you'd have to pull out your taser. Otherwise, you could do things like scrolling or whatever. Obviously, we don't want to do that. What you do want to do is select your taser first, and that'll be the order in which it shows up in your loadout when you pull out those items, basically. So if I press taser, and then I click C2, and then let's say lockpick gun, and then pepper spray, when I go to go, I will have my taser, and then I'll have my C2, and then I'll have my lockpick gun, and then I'll have my pepper spray, because I picked it in that specific order. This is also the case with grenades. So if I want to go flashbang, stinger, flashbang, stinger, flashbang, stinger, flashbang, stinger, obviously you'll get the idea. Obviously, when you're swapping back between it's not going to be a big difference. But let's say I am throwing a grenade with quick throw. I do my flashbang first. Then I do my stinger. And then I do my flashbang first. And then my stinger. So you kind of get the idea. It'll alternate between the grenade throws. So if you are using quick throw, which I primarily use, that's going to be an issue. A lot of the time, most of the time I am running just one type of grenade. If I'm wearing a gas mask, I'm using the gas, flashbang, flash goggles, of course, blah, 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 blah. But anyway, let's talk about how to throw stingers. So here we are again. We have the stingers. We're going to get low to the floor, and we'll kind of notice how the grenade is thrown, you'll actually notice it actually rolls perfectly straight, opposed to a flashbang, which actually does tend to roll off to the side. So that is something to note whenever you are throwing a grenade. Let's say, for example, I need to throw a grenade around a corner with a flashbang. Obviously, it's going to be a lot easier with a flashbang than it is a stinger. Another thing about the stinger is when you throw it, it has a much sharper return angle. I'm going to kind of show this off. I'm going to try to throw it in the exact same spot against the door, you know, where the open kind of sign is there. Open the door. I'm going to alternate between a stinger and a flashbang. You'll kind of notice that the stinger has a sharper angle of return. While the flashbang actually, let me just light up this area here. You'll see that the stinger is much more in the corner, so it's going to take like a harsher angle. So when you hit it, it's going to bounce back more. Versus the flashbang, it's going to bounce off more of how you would think it would, where it's going to get a angle and kind of ricochet better into the room, essentially. So when you are throwing stingers, make note of this, because this can make a very big difference in your utilization of them. A lot of the time I do just recommend using flashbangs simply because it's not as, you know, difficult to throw them. You can use stingers, of course, but you need to know how to like throw them properly without them having return to sender. So we don't want that to happen, obviously, but you can kind of see here, like it can bounce very sharply back towards you. And that's just what I've noticed with stingers, and it's probably just because the shape of the stinger when you're throwing super close, that's probably the reason why. And obviously this can be an issue if you are, you know, throwing stingers through, let's say, a breached hole in the door that you shoot with a breaching shotgun. It can be, you know, an issue if you are trying to throw your stinger through the hole and, you know, it doesn't bounce as much, or it bounces off the angle. It's not going to, you know, if you hit the side of the door frame, it's not going to be an issue. So you can avoid this by just getting really close to the door frame and throwing it like point blank range, kind of like how I'm doing here. A lot of the time you shouldn't be throwing it far away because it does risk you hitting the sides. And as I said, if you're throwing a stinger, it's going to be a little less it's going to be less of a chance if you are throwing a flashbang instead of a stinger, basically. So when you are throwing stingers, make sure if you do hit an angle, it's going to be potentially more devastating than throwing a flashbang, for instance. So these are small differences and stuff, and same with like smoke grenades or 9-bangs. I didn't test 9-bangs too much. Honestly, I'm not a fan of the grenade, but if you are, say, for example, banking it off like this kind of door frame here, as you can kind of see, it might go through, it might not, depending on the kind of the velocity and stuff, the angle. Most of the time, if you are going through, as I said, throwing it through these small areas or doors or whatever, just try to be closer to it, and preferably use a, use a flashbang. Is just going to be a better result, right? Especially if it's like a half open door and you're kind of facing it. Like, imagine if it's like a T, so the door is like the top of the T, and you're the line. And you throw a stinger and you expect it to bounce really well, it's going to return to you much more aggressively than a flashbang. So you have a better chance of throwing those flashbangs when it's like, you know, these kind of angles, versus whenever you're using a stinger, it's going to just, you know, more or less be way more difficult to bounce. And sometimes it gets ridiculous bounces back to you. As you can kind of see in some of this footage that I'm showing here. So just keep that in mind whenever you are using these grenades. You do have to learn how to use stingers a bit better than you need to do flashbangs. They're more intuitive when you use flashbangs, so I'll probably just use flashbangs, honestly, quite frankly, unless you want to go through the trouble of learning how to use stingers. And I do want to point out, when you are throwing flashbangs or stingers and you're like close to the door, kind of how I am, if you just want to like hit the tip of the door and then you can lean back or whatever, this is a breech shotgun door, so it's like opened like slightly halfway. And obviously it does make, like when you're leaning lower to the ground, it can help you throw more accurately when you are trying to get through like a crack on the door, because it's going to be, first of all, more aligned with where you're throwing it, of course, right? Because you're lower to the ground if there's like a crack in the floor or something. And you're going to have a better chance of like it lobbing instead of losing its momentum. So even though, technically speaking, if you do throw it perfectly fine standing up, when you are leaning down like this. It's just more consistent. It's going to be more reliable, and you'll kind of see that you'll be able to throw grenades, generally speaking, better overall. Like statistically, you'll be throwing better angles, better grenades, better, you know, locations. You're going to get them more pinpoint of where you actually want the grenade to land versus standing up straight and just tossing them. As I said, I also recommend, as I said before, you aim, you throw the grenade with quick throw to better kind of throw it on that angle. Otherwise, you know, you are going to have these issues. And for testing, you can test in the training area for a lot of these little cubby holes to kind of see like, oh, I can throw it at this range, and you can throw it, you know, at that range or whatever. And a lot of the time, the size of the stinger versus the flashbang didn't seem to make too big of a difference. I'm not sure if it's just like, I don't have enough like, you know, testing to really confirm or deny this, technically speaking, but I do notice that stingers do sometimes tend to, you know, tag things a bit worse than a flashbang. But as I said, there's a lot of variables like terrain, the texture of the ground. There's like, you know, rugs and all that other kind of stuff. So I'm honestly not going to be talking too much about air bursting in this video. A lot of the time it's not super effective. It can help you identify if there's targets nearby, and it can stun them, but on certain areas and certain locations, it's very, very niche and very, very specific. And it does take a lot of practice. I'm probably not going to address this too much, but essentially air bursting is just throwing a grenade in the air and having it explode in the air. To get over certain obstacles or whatever versus just throwing it and sliding on the ground. Most of the time you're doing this simply because you are trying to do it in a safe place where you are not going to get injured. Also, it's a good way to kind of use and utilize a grenade to explode in the air, which will obviously increase the radius and kind of the better line of sight to be able to hit a lot of the targets. So if you don't have a good throw angle, you'd be throwing it in the air. And then you'd be exploding in the air. A lot of the time, there's not too many levels where this is going to be the case. It's going to be more wide open levels like these palms, or maybe hide and seek or whatever, where there is more space in the air to throw it so it can explode. It is a little bit complex in terms of like the way you should be doing it, but a lot of the time, whenever you are doing it, it's going to be basically very much the same. You're just going to be trying to listen as best you can to see if there's any enemies, and if you are able to get line of sight, you yell at them. It's going to be a little less effective than just throwing a grenade how you would normally, but there's always that option. And then there's also some more complex things where you're in the warehouse of grease bombs. You can throw it off the top of the roof. It's basically kind of like air bursting, a little bit different maybe. I'm kind of put it into the category of air bursting, but I'm probably not going to be talking much more about air bursting in any way, but just know that it's a good utilization tool to identify where targets are, or if there is targets, especially when you're using stingers, is usually what you would use it with. And then when it comes to using smoke grenades, or gas grenades rather, I mean, they're basically smoke grenades at this point now. When you use gas grenades, a lot of the time trying to bounce it off of multiple surfaces, so like the ground and then the door, to get like a better center of the area. It is going to take a little bit of practice to learn how to use the gas grenades and throw them properly. You do want to optimize how you're throwing them. Ultimately, it doesn't make a big difference. If you throw them really awfully, obviously it's going to not be great. Most of the time, if you are going to throw a gas grenade, it's going to be farther away, kind of like at this door frame, for example, would be a good example. So just try to like roll it. It's going to hit the edge of it. So it's like, okay, it's concealing that door frame. That's usually how you'd want to throw it if you are just trying to think, you know, quickly without having to calculate a bunch of directions and the slide and the spin and you know, hitting other stuff. Essentially rolling to it and just making sure it doesn't go inside the room to change the variable. Throwing anywhere around the door frame is basically going to net you like this type of value of space in terms of like how it's going to be positioned. Like these are good positioned gas grenades. You can enter this area and, you know, basically pie it off and be very safe with that kind of stuff. And then, as I said before, when it comes to the gas grenades, they're just very similar to how, you know, flashbangs are thrown. So you kind of learn how to use flashbangs first. You'll more or less figure out how to use gas grenades pretty well as well. They're very similar in terms of their trajectory. They basically behave the same way as far as I'm aware. They do tend to still roll to the left when you are leaning to the left side and right side. So just keep that in mind. Another thing I do want to point out about throwing the grenades closer to the ground. There are obviously variables like the ground texture and other things like rugs and stuff like that when you are throwing grenades low to the ground. But I'd also like to point out, whenever you are throwing on the opposite angle, leaning to the left, it's slightly more likely for the grenade to be thrown straight rather than to be curved off. Now, you can see this in a few of these throws that I'm doing right now. You can actually see how when I throw to the right, it's slightly more consistently rolling to the left. And then when I'm leaning on the left side, it'll actually more or less generally stay a bit straighter, but it still can roll the other direction, as in going left instead of just going straight. So it is important to kind of note that. So if you are going to throw left leaning, just keep that in mind. And then when it comes to stingers, stingers will be thrown very straight, as I've kind of probably discussed in other videos. It's important to note that the closer you throw stingers, and this is the case with stingers when you're doing on either side, it should be straight more or less, unless there's something influencing its trajectory, like a rug or whatever. But when you are throwing it closer and closer, stingers will bounce pretty well against the ground and like kind of fly pretty far. Much like flashbangs, obviously you have to worry about the curve, but the closer and closer you throw it, it does lose a lot of its momentum very quickly. And I think that's just because of how when it leaves your hand, it may not be hitting a part that is going to roll very well. So just keep that in mind when you are throwing around a corner, for example. So like if you're going to throw it really, really close, if you throw it, make sure that you're going to be throwing it at a harsher angle. So standing up straight will make it so it doesn't fly as far, obviously. But other things like even pieces of glass or other debris can get in the way. So you have to make sure you are throwing higher up. It's going to potentially bounce more. So just make sure like the best way to really do this is to bank it off of things. So throwing it against a part of like rolling it towards a door, having it bounce off while you are throwing low. Also, alternatively, you can throw very, very high against a door while squatting down low. So this is happening live. I'm doing this live. For example, here we want to throw very carefully out of range. Do like this, slow. I'm bouncing off the staircase, so that would kind of mess me up, but as long as you get it on them, it's good. Guy's resisting. So if we want to like get him and somebody else, we're going to throw it a little bit higher. We're going to bounce it off the back of the fridge. We're going to flash him again. This guy is just really stubborn for some reason. And same thing here. We can thread it through the needle. So he doesn't hit the back of his head. Going to slide in, and it's going to clear kind of like that section. Now, if we were to throw it here, what we can do is we're going to bounce it off of this area here, tilt down a little bit for the bounce, and go like that. And then we have to worry about here, this angle here. So there we go. We cleared that angle. Same with this. There's a civilian over here. So for example, this, we can throw it off this door hinge right here. Oh, I missed a little bit. A little bit down. Thought we to try to hit that door hinge. It's going to bounce at the center of that area, and it would clear essentially that, right? So here, oh, okay, he killed a civilian. I could take the shot, but I'm going to throw a grenade. Make sure to clear where you are throwing the grenade. You do need a little bit more clearance than you would normally a free lean, full lean around a corner. It is just slightly more of a thing in the way, so just keep that in mind. I want to throw this against the pillar. As you can see, it'll be a good flash. And of course, if we're going to throw around here, we can throw kind of like this. It's going to go into the area like that. Roll it. As you can see, like that was a solid grenade throw into this room. So it's really about bouncing it off the floor is the most important thing. I'm out of flashbang, so we'll go to the next level. So once again, this is a locked door every single time. We're just going to blow this open. You can also throw angles like this. So as I kind of showed you before, I'm just going to throw it close to the ground, throw it perfectly through. Obviously, that's not going to be a good flashbang because it didn't really throw it in a good spot. We did hit somebody though, but that's not the point. We're trying to show consistency and good grenade throws. This actually was an okay grenade throw. It'll clear like essentially the front here and the front and any sides over here. So that wasn't actually too bad of a grenade. These grenade throws are really good because you can actually have it so I did actually do another one. I'm going to try that close to the door here. And as you can kind of see like the difference between throwing it a little bit up or a little bit down, it'll roll more or less. You just need to get the feel of it to try to get that figured out. It will take some practice, of course, but you will eventually get to the point where you can actually gauge how close and how far the grenade is going to be thrown and where it's going to kind of land, generally speaking. It will take some practice, as I said, and it will take a lot of consistency of trying to figure this out. A lot of the time when it comes to grenade throws, a lot of people are throwing them by taking them out and then throwing them. A lot of the times it's better to aim, do something like this. So like I can angle it around this corner here. Gonna get a nice close low to the ground, gonna roll around. It'll actually roll away from me in terms of being out of the line of sight to me, so it won't blind me, and it'll curve around a corner, so it is very, very handy. Like for example, there's this statue here. I can throw it at this statue. It's probably gonna bounce pretty well into the room, and I didn't get that because the desk was in the way. If you know the geometry to the area already, it will help you significantly. So bringing something like a mirror gun, if you are unaware of the geometry of a room, this can really help you throw grenades around corners. You're just going to check at the bottom of the door, crack the door open, throw it how you think you should throw it around that corner. And of course, the other option, which is a very awesome option, unless you're using a launcher or mirror gun, is honestly the breaching shotgun. Very underrated. And of course, when it comes to maps like Ides of March, where there are certain types of doors you can breach with using a breaching shotgun. What you can do is, aside from shooting the bottom and disarming it, you can also throw a grenade through the top of any wooden door, and obviously just going to try to bounce it off of the top of the roof. Make sure the area is clear, of course. I don't know if this has a bomb or not, but okay. And you can throw it like more clearly into the room without actually having to crack it, having a limited access throw angle. So for example here, I'm just going to try to hit it like right where my reticle is. I'm just going to try my best. Might bounce off of something. Lean back away if I can try to avoid it. It didn't clear the whole room, but it did clear maybe like the backside over here. So I know there's not going to be anybody in this spot here. So this is really important to know how to throw these types of grenades. So I'm going to throw it over by the doors. Didn't look like there's anybody close to that angle. It could have been blocked by a couch though, so I need to be careful when I am approaching here. It hit this civilian over here. Now if I want to do the same thing, I'm going to do this. I'm going to throw it. Most of the time, stingers are harder to throw, as you can kind of see. Flashbangs are a little less of an issue. And also said, aim like this, and we hear a pain yell, so we're going to breach in. So we know there's a guy there, of course. And this can definitely help you through a lot of the game, because a lot of the time, throwing flashbangs can be insanely powerful. So for example, if I want to throw it in the middle of the room here, a little bit, count for the carpet a little bit, lean away, go like that. I hear a pained yell. Now there's somebody here, there's an enemy here. As we can see, we are clear. Grenades are always thrown slightly higher than where you're aiming. So you just got to aim a little bit down. We're going to try to throw it the top area as long as that top thing doesn't mess it up. Stingers are a little bit worse, as I've discussed, but it's not too bad. Upper angles like this, a little bit tricky. You're just going to try to throw it as best you can. Try to hit it off the ceiling. Maybe a tip off the wall. Always tricky throws. Looks like there's nobody immediately in the area. Like there's a door here. I'm going to try to throw it just like this. Down to the floor. Got those sight. 2 yells. Good. There we go. So making sure it's just throwing in the center of the room. And then you can think about how to worry about pieces of cover, so you can check out those pieces of cover. But if you see somebody who's stunned by that pain yell or whatever, pain yell or my eyes, they'll be like, ah, my eyes, you know, then obviously you can do it like that. But as you can kind of see, this is a good example of how to throw those grenades. And you do have to be quick thinking. Just think about, like, you know, the best way to kind of bounce off grenades off walls. You know, for example, this is a little more complex of an angle here. So throwing it off of, like, it's very difficult. You could throw it through probably the bars here, right? But this is a tricky throw. You probably do this angle if I had more time. I'd do this. As long as you can you throw it through this? Okay, I don't think you can throw it through that. Anyway, you can't really throw it through that, so that's an issue. But even bouncing it off of, like, this wall over here, as long as it has enough strong bounce on it, there's some out of grenades, but you would throw it essentially, like, right here, get, like, the top of this part of the site, it would bounce roughly here, and it would kind of bounce essentially probably like around here-ish. And that's a good way into the room. It clears this top and that kind of thing. So yeah, so anyway, that's going to be it for the video. Thank you for watching and have a good day.
Hey, yo, watch the windows. Somebody probably made a call.
Police, get your hands up!